and they work directly with artisans and farmers who are part of global supply chains. The role of myself and other colleagues in London is to advocate for company policies and for the British government to take policies that support the dignity and fairness in global supply chains, with our interests always being those at the furthest end producing for our shelves and for our supermarkets. We look at garments, we look at green beans, tea, coffee, those kind of classic fair trade supply chains, and also recently we've looked at palm oil, which has led me to Liberia. So land grabbing. Land grabbing we've spoken about a little bit already. It can be best characterised as unlawful seizure of land, underhand, opportunistic, and it's going on right now. The most recent estimates from 2016 are that British companies have been involved in 124 land transactions outside the European Union, and overall that accounts for parcels of land the size of Wales. And in looking to find out more about what this global land grab really means, I went in November to interview members of a community in Grand Bassa County in Liberia. In the post-Civil War years, Liberia's economic prospects have been pretty bleak, and the policy taken by the Liberian government has been to sell off large parts of their own land to international agricultural investors and mining companies, and they've been given as concessions. Communities that are resident on those lands have not been adequately consulted and often have been tricked, and I'm sure people can see the parallels with what previous panelists have spoken about. Equatorial Palm Oil are the company under question. There are British companies registered on the AIM market, which is a sub-market of the London Stock Exchange, and for the last 10 years they've been establishing 2 large palm oil plantations in rural Liberia. The community that stuck with me most from my interviews had been visited by officials from the government of Liberia and from Equatorial Palm Oil staff. It was the first time since the war had finished that people with weapons had come into their community, and these people were just there to assert that a deal had been done in Monrovia, in the capital, that meant that Equatorial Palm Oil now had the right to develop large parts of the neighbourhood. But it wasn't as coercive as that might sound. They also made fairly handsome promises. For each rubber tree, a member of the community would be given $97, and then that rubber tree could be bulldozed and they could establish a palm oil plantation, which sounded to many like a very good deal. There was no paper signed, there was no memorandum of understanding. They would also have employment, the roads would be sorted out, there would be a clinic, there would be a school, there would be opportunities for their kids. And so people understandably thought that that was a good route to economic development, and there are very few other routes available to them. In the years since that decision was made, the $97 that had been promised became $6. There was no school, no clinic, and the state of the roads is still completely parlous. And so people were extremely angry and looking for ways that they can now access justice. It's obviously extremely difficult. We have various cases that have been brought in front of the UK courts over the previous years of communities trying to hold British companies accountable for their actions overseas, and it's extremely difficult. That is through design. Companies establish complex legal structures that mean it's very difficult to hold headquarters accountable for the actions of children companies overseas. And the lack of paperwork is obviously, again, a completely deliberate ploy to ensure that it's very difficult to hold people accountable for their lives. What we're calling for is for the UK government to establish a duty on British companies overseas to respect the environment and to respect human rights, and that would be built on the principle of a failure to prevent. If you can be shown that human rights have been abused in your operations or in your supply chains, and you could have taken steps to prevent that, but you failed to do so, then you would be accountable in UK courts. And it's extremely important that that is something that happens in the UK courts, because as has been discussed by previous panellists, if a case were to be brought in Liberia against equatorial palm oil, firstly, the resources available to the Liberian justice system may not allow for that case to be properly brought, but also the various issues of complicity of the Liberian government with this whole situation would also make it very difficult for communities to access justice. We do not have a huge amount of optimism that this law that we're calling for will come out in the next few years, certainly until a change of government. There is, however, I think, a maturing discussion about the role of business regulation to ensure that businesses respect human rights. We had a Modern Slavery Act from 2015 that requires British companies to be more transparent about where they pose threats to human rights and may have risks of modern slavery in their supply chains. And we have other European countries that are starting to do similar things. French has a Devoir de Vigilance Act since 2017, which has required large French companies to respect human rights in their operations, and a Ugandan community is bringing a claim against Total, the oil company, for their failure to respect land rights in Uganda. So across Europe, we're starting to see a bit of momentum behind these kinds of things, and we will be, as Tradecraft Exchange, launching a campaign the week after next to coincide with the UK Africa Investment Summit, calling on the British government to follow suit with a law establishing a duty on British companies to respect human rights in their overseas operations. But I'd be very happy to speak about that in more depth if people have specific questions. But yeah, I'll hand back over to Nikita.
Thank you all so much. I'm just going to we started at 10 o'clock. Okay. We don't have a huge amount of time, but we'll make it work. It's very clear that there's, a lot of the colonial crimes have not been dealt with. We are seeing them repeated in the examples that Tom described. I mean, it's really shocking to hear about the palm oil companies. It does sound like it could have been something that was happening in the Kericho land grabs, back during the colonial period. So clearly, bringing up the topic of reparations is absolutely necessary, because it's clear that whatever we're doing right now is not working. I wanted to just very quickly bring up one point that you made, Professor Githuro, which is about what role do the current governments of former colonised countries have to play in all of this. I think you just touched on it briefly, and perhaps we can think about that. And then the other question I wanted to ask is, if, for example, the British government or even multinational corporations are not willing to come to the table to even have the discussions about reparations, how can we push forward in order to achieve the justice that is required for these? I think the point that you made that £2,600 might not sound like so much, but for the first time in someone's life they were able to build a house. It is so important that these issues are dealt with and brought forward, and I'm just wondering, do we have other ideas for how we can ensure that that justice is achieved for these people who have, in many cases been abandoned? So for all the panel, I'll start with you, Professor Githuro.
As I said, it is the role. Okay, as we sit here, we are fighting on two fronts. We are fighting here in London, but we also have a struggle back home to convince our own leadership that it is necessary for them to support us. I'm very pleased to have the governor here, but he's an elected person, and therefore has the ability and the place to talk for his own people. Now, the policymakers is the whole story, and without their support, it also becomes very, very difficult. I think Tom has also, briefly touched upon some of the difficulties you get in Liberia, the complicity of, certain local agencies maybe not actually In short, we are living in a colonial time, neo-colonial times. You know, the colonial linkages are still very, very strong, and I think that explains everything, because as you're trying to get rid of the tea, to get compensation from the tea farms, they are linked to the local government, they are linked to the past, they're linked to the present, and so forth. So it's quite something to entangle, and I think this should be seen as a discussion, as a process, rather than one final end, because after Kericho, we have others.
Thank you very much, Professor and Nikita. As Professor Asable said, that this is something for discussion. This is something that we do not have ready solution. This is something that needs a serious meeting of the minds, comparing notes and trying to chart the way forward. And I think for the Mamao case, much as you need support from Kenya, you also have one advantage. Can you consider going to the European Court of Human Rights? And the Mau were subject of the Crown of England from 1950s all the way up to when we got independence. There's the Independence Act of 1963, where the British said, or the House of Commons stated, that they would no longer be responsible, or UK would no longer be responsible over a territory called Kenya. I think you could, I've not sat down really to think about it. You could go to the European Court of Human Rights and say, much as these people have Brexit, but they can't Brexit when it comes to issues of human rights, you have exhausted local remedies, or the local remedies in UK were not available. Can now the European Court of Human Rights consider looking at this case on its own merit? Because matters of human rights, you cannot use the issue of limitation. Yet the same people who are claiming that there's limitation are enjoying the fruits of what they did several decades ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. For us in Kericho, we are very grateful to the new constitution, which has created two levels of government. A county governments, which are 47 in number, and one national government called the Republic of Kenya. The challenge facing most victims all over Africa is legal fee. In our case, it is the county government of Kericho which is paying for the legal fees. And we've done it through cooperation with the national government. Before we took the action, we wrote to the Office of the Attorney General, which supports our quest to make sure that there is justice for the victims. So this is something that is a privilege for us, and I want to thank the national government for realizing that, yes, these people have a genuine concern and genuine complaint, for which we need to sit with the British government and say, yes, there were violations. Can we discuss how these people can be remedied? The issues that are being raised, and these are of interest to the victims, are mainly two. Apology from the UK government. And number two, compensation or reparation, so that these people can have their problems ameliorated to some degree. Fortunately also for us, the new constitution entrenched National Land Commission to address national land injustices since the time of since colonial era. And we have 10 recommendations which we would like to put before the British government, and we can discuss around this, and the victims can feel better. Number one, and you will agree with me that they are very fair recommendations. Number one, apology. I think that's not a very difficult thing to do. Number two, NLC said it was a mistake for Kericho to continue being crown land after 1963. So it is as if the rest of Kenya became independent and Kericho continued being under the ground. It makes no sense. And therefore, we are saying, even the title deeds of the multinationals read Colony and Protectorate of Kenya. You can imagine if Unilever is to sell their business as a going concern, they don't have a title deed reading Kericho County or Republic of Kenya. And this needs to be regularized as well. The other very important recommendation is, since these people have suffered from 1902, can there be compensation, some net profits for loss of livelihoods? Then the rest will go to the multinational companies on the ground. For example, they have never been involved in any single CSR since they came. They are now close to 120 years. They have not built a single hospital. They have not built a single school. Yet if you look at the price of tea in London here, it is £20 per kilo. And there is the issue of transfer pricing. They underquote the prices in Mombasa auction. Then when they come here, they rip you off. The price of 1 kilo of tea in Mombasa is less than $3. So they're exploiting you as well. You are buying tea not at market rate. Look, a farmer in Kericho sells at the auction to Lipton for a song. And there's a lot of tea in the auction, but I'm very sure you are told tea is always scarce. That's why you have to pay so much for Earl Grey. So we want an amicable solution in this. We don't want to use unconstitutional methods to make the British government understand that we need a redress of this matter. Thank you.
A couple of thoughts just to add on alternative ways of helping communities achieve justice. One obvious area is public education of consumers and citizens, and obviously I applaud the work that the Museum of British Colonialism is doing here. I read that 59% of the British public feels like the British Empire is something to be proud of, and that was in 2016, so it's clear that a large bit of work remains to be done. And then in terms of other ways of placing pressure on businesses today, investors, mainly based in London, are financing a lot of the land grabs that we're interested in and that we've talked about. And many people in this room will have pension funds which are part of that bigger picture. So write to your pension fund, ask what their position is when it comes to land grabs. And then also thinking about what can be done in laws in other countries. There's something called free, prior and informed consent, which is something that exists in the UN Convention on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as other international legal instruments, and it's the enshrining of the idea that if you're involved in a land transaction, you need to ensure that you get the consent of the people who live on that land and who own that land and who work that land, and that needs to be done in a way that is transparent, that gives people exactly the right information, and that allows them to withdraw their consent at any time. And those kinds of laws are starting to come in various countries that will give a much stronger legal basis in those countries for communities to bring cases. So it's quite specific, but I think worth bringing up nonetheless.
Absolutely, thank you. I have a lot of other questions, but I'm concerned about getting the rest of the audience involved. So as we've done with other panels, but I'm going to do it at a much reduced level this time. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, come up with any ideas, any things that you'd like to ask the panel, and then you can ask them. There's a microphone. Great, thank you, 2 minutes. To talk amongst yourselves.
I just have a really specific question. like, you know, the example of like the rubber tree, like how does that happen?